Joining us now is Washington Post reporter Gus Garcia-Roberts. He was a member of the Newsday team that was a finalist for the 2014 Pulitzer Prize for its series on hidden police misconduct on Long Island. He's also the author of Jimmy the King, Murder, Vice, and the Reign of a Dirty Cop, which chronicles the rise and fall of former police chief James Burke, who you just heard about there. Also joining us is former New York State Senator Phil Boyle, whose district included where the Gilgo Beach murders took place. Thank you to both of you for being with us. Gus, I want to start with you. I mean, you really know James Burke unlike anyone else. You wrote the book. You know all the ins and the outs of all the trouble that he's had. What did you think today when this development came that he was arrested for soliciting sex in a park?
I think I was most interested in James Burke from the beginning because he was this figure of power, right? And what you saw today is a more sad portrait. I think it's somebody who's hit rock bottom. I mean, this was 10:05 a.m. in a public park, apparently, allegedly exposing himself and soliciting sex from an undercover cop. It just kind of doesn't get lower than that. And so what you kind of see is this exposure, no pun intended, over the past several years of James Burke for who he really is. And to me, it's just kind of a growing public shock that this guy was the top uniformed officer in one of the largest police departments in the country.
And Gus, and then that he tried to get out of it, allegedly, that he tried to say, wait a minute, this is who I am. Don't do this. I guess that doesn't really probably come as a surprise based on everything that you've reported.
Well, that is one of the more telling pieces of this episode, I think, is the fact that he tried to get out of it and that he wasn't able to get out of it, right? Because I think anybody who is familiar with James Burke over his career, they're not necessarily surprised that he was soliciting sex, but it's more so that he was actually held accountable, that he was actually arrested. And not only that, but, photos are circulating of him being arrested that cops took. Photos of the police report that are extremely embarrassing are circulating. And you sort of see that there's this, kind of mass repudiation by cops in Suffolk County of James Burke, which I think is a pretty big surprise considering how powerful this guy was and that he really ruled by fear for years.
Phil, there is already so much suspicion that Burke may have covered up things involving the Gilgo Beach murders, that he stopped the investigation because of what he was secretly doing behind the scenes. Now his arrest today has so many people thinking, wait a minute, what was really going on back then? Should there be a bigger investigation? I mean, what do you think, Phil? Do you think the state should open up an investigation to find out if he actually did try to cover anything up?
Yes, Brian. Actually, when I was a state senator 2 years ago, I held a press conference at Gilgo Beach calling on just that. I called on New York State Attorney General Tish James to do an investigation of the investigation, in essence. There were so many questions about Burke. When he was originally made police chief by our Suffolk County executive, Steve Bellone, who's still in office, him kicking the FBI out of the investigation early on, him not involving state troopers, not involving the Nassau County Police, which was the neighboring county where some of the bodies were found. This is the type of guy you did not want as a police officer. Forget about making him the chief of police. And we have the answers today. 13 years later, they catch the defendant, the alleged killer, Rex Uriman, when they had all the information they needed at the very beginning of this investigation.
Yeah, it didn't make any sense why it took so long. So you mentioned, Phil, you asked for the investigation years ago into what was going on behind the scenes. Are they going to do it? Are they finally going to do it? Because if today's any evidence, it seems like they need to.
I agree, and I hope they do. I hope Tish James does it. At the time, she did write back to me and said that she had to get a referral from the governor or the county executive. Obviously, Steve Bellone, the guy who appointed Jim Burke as police chief, he wasn't going to ask for it because it just would have embarrassed him politically.
Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.